Joining us now is California Congressman Eric Swalwell, who served as an impeachment manager in Trump's second impeachment trial following the January 6th insurrection. Congressman, good to see you. Let's start with the filing itself. What stood out to you the most in this trove of new evidence that was put forward by the special counsel?
Two things, Anna. One was the amount of people around him in his inner circle who he was listening to, who were working overtime to try and defy the will of the voters. Individuals who were saying, make him riot, as well as the president's own acknowledgement that he knew these claims were crazy, which shows you that this was never about a unique belief that he had actually won the election. It was just a selfish belief that he should remain in power in defiance and counter to the will of the voters.
Trump says the timing of this latest filing by the special counsel amounts to election interference by Jack Smith and the DOJ. What do you say to that?
Election interference is when the American people in a landslide, not just in the popular vote, but by over 70 electoral votes, elect Joe Biden as president, and then you violently send your supporters to storm the Capitol to try and overturn the will of the voters. That's election interference. But there's something I'll never forget about that second impeachment, is the managers were getting ready the night before the Senate trial. An IT vendor, this is a contractor, is showing us a room just off the Senate floor where we were to work. And they were showing us how to use the printers, how to use the remote for the television. I, of course, had to ask what the Wi-Fi password was, and they told me the network was called Managers. And I pulled this young man aside after he set up the room, and I told him it was so wonderful that we had just impeached the former president, and they had put this room together so quickly for us to work out of. And this 23-year-old, who was not a partisan at all, he looked at me on it and he said, well, we were the team that did the first impeachment. And to be honest, we kept everything up because we figured you all would be back. And that's what this is about, is that we all know that young nonpartisan contractor knew who Donald Trump was and that he would again commit crimes. And so we have an opportunity as a country now in this upcoming election, knowing what he's done in the past, will we allow him to come back and commit more crimes against the country?
Well, the choice is up to the voters about who leads in this next chapter. It isn't the first time we've been hearing the former president alleging election interference. He's called the many legal cases we've been covering, all election interference. He suggested the Secret Service was interfering in the election when he had to move an outdoor rally indoors for the sake of security. He's claimed Google is interfering, pointing to more bad stories, he says, that are about him and good stories about Vice President Harris. In fact, we've counted more than a dozen examples of claims like this. What do you think this is all about?
What he calls election interference is either democracy protection or his own security measures. And by the way, this timing of Jack Smith's filings in this case is a timetable that Donald Trump created because he believed he was king and because he believed he had at least 3 Supreme Court justices that he had put on the court who were working out of his palm. He challenged the idea of a president not being completely immune. And so he delayed his own trial. And the timing just so happened to be a couple weeks before the election that this trial would restart up. This could have been tried months ago and could have been resolved. If he was so innocent, he could have been acquitted by now. But it was his own timetable, and now he's paying the price for this public filing.
Your former colleague on the other side of the aisle in the House, Liz Cheney, just campaigned alongside Vice President Harris in Wisconsin yesterday in a town known as the birthplace of the Republican Party. Here was part of her message.
He told the Justice Department to lie for him. He conspired to have fake electoral votes cast, and he corruptly pressured his vice president to take illegal and unconstitutional actions. He summoned a mob to Washington, D.C. with his lies, and he sent the armed mob to the United States Capitol in an effort to stop the counting of electoral votes. As the violent mob attacked our Capitol, in Donald Trump's name,
Congressman, how much of an impact do you think she can make with conservatives who may just want this topic to go away?
Well, it's going to be a big impact. And I was raised in a conservative family, and I married a girl from a conservative town in southern Indiana. And real conservatives believe in small government, a rule of law, and that the United States is strong in the world. And Donald Trump subscribes to none of that. I really admire what Liz Cheney is doing because she is risking her personal security. She's thrown away any chance of ever being elected again within the Republican Party because she's putting her country over party. And I'll never forget, right before or right after January 6th, we had a critical vote around what had happened on January 6th. And Liz was there with her father, former Vice President Cheney, who has floor privileges, to sit on the floor. And I watched as almost every single one of my Democratic colleagues who probably spoke out when Vice President Cheney was the vice president for his role in the Iraq War, there was a line on the House floor to go over and shake his hand and thank he and his daughter for what they were doing. And so that shows, again, this is about not a political party, but rather about our country and what we value.
Congressman Eric Swalwell, thank you very much for joining us.